What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, April 10th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever is in store for us over this next weekend here. So, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions and opinions. And let's just get right on into it here. There's a lot going on. First of all, as you know, when we ended the show yesterday, the elections in Israel were neck and neck. Netanyahu had been trailing in the polls. The Blue and White Party was supposedly ahead by 4 seats. And then, wonder of wonder, in the middle of the night, Netanyahu had this come from behind victory and has basically won the Israeli election. Imagine my shock. And of course, Gantz is still insisting that, this is all based on the exit polls, and they haven't actually finished counting all the votes yet, and that they should wait. But Netanyahu has declared victory. The corporate media, Western media, is saying, yes, it is so, mahi dictum est, and he's forming a new coalition with his traditional partners. And as a matter of fact, Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Britain Party is expected to join the new coalition. So Netanyahu's position, if anything, is even stronger than it was before, and that does not bode very well for the poor people of Gaza and the West Bank. Okay. Now, Netanyahu has thanked Donald Trump for answering one of his important requests on the eve of election, and that, of course, was to designate the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. And the timing obviously wasn't a coincidence. Trump did that to help Netanyahu, and it apparently did work. Now, Gilad Atzmon is saying it's not entirely a bad thing, because had Gantz won or anybody else won, probably Palestinians would have breathed a sigh of relief and said, thank goodness Netanyahu is gone. But with not Netanyahu set for another term, it's galvanized resistance among the Palestinian people. And so looking at Gilad Atzmon's article here, he's saying basically in a major way, Hamas has won again, because support for them among the Palestinians is definitely on the uptick. And Hamas knows that Israel is running out of military and political options, let alone solutions to the conflict. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Now, the other day I talked about how there was a big stink over the fact that Netanyahu's party had put 1,200 secret cameras inside Arab voting places. And was it to simply scare Arabs away from voting? Of course, Netanyahu is saying they're there to deter election fraud. But it turns out there's a little quirk in Israeli election law that puts a whole different spin on it, because apparently if unauthorized cameras are discovered in a polling station, that polling station and all of its ballots are disqualified. So there's a big potential for fraud there. Haaretz is a little bit less than sanguine about Netanyahu's victory, and put out a podcast basically saying, Netanyahu, the political genius leading Israel into the abyss. And it said, basically, Netanyahu secured another term in office using tactics perfected by despots and dictators. What happens next? That's one thing about Haaretz. They do not pull any punches, and they do not suck up to the government the way America's corporate media does. Here in the United States, apparently in this decision to declare the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group, Trump overruled the top Pentagon brass. Now, this is a story that's coming out of Politico. And interestingly enough, apparently Pentagon officials said that this declaration that the IRGC is a terrorist group could easily lead to retaliatory attacks against U.S. troops by Iranian-backed forces anywhere in the Middle East, and threats from Iranian leaders that U.S. troops could face consequences. But apparently, and this article says, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo advised Donald Trump to just ignore the Pentagon. What do they know about war and Iran and soldiering and all that other stuff? And so once again, we're seeing Pompeo and Bolton, these fossils left over from George W. Bush and the insane war against Iraq. They're the ones telling Trump to ignore the brass. That, of course, is going to create a certain degree of friction between the Pentagon and the White House, and that is not necessarily a healthy thing. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Trying to add insult to injury, now that they're basically trying to declare that the IRGC is the equivalent of ISIS, except they don't work for the United States. Pompeo came on out and declared the commander of the of Iran's elite Quds force, Major General Qassem Soleimani, is a terrorist on the same level as Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And he followed up by saying, and he dresses weird, and he smells funny, and his dog is really, really ugly, and he can't dance worth beans. So it just provoke. Now, much of the rest of the world is not very happy about what Trump did. Japan has already said they do not intend to follow the United States in designating the IRGC as a terrorist group. It is a ridiculous thing to do anyway. These are state actors. They're uniformed military. They're roughly the equivalent of the American Coast Guard. They have a chain of command going right up to the government. That's not what terrorist groups are. But Trump just went ahead and did it because, after all, he's Trump and we're the exceptional nation. And Trump is just, again, Pompeo and Bolton, the two biggest mistakes Trump has made since taking office. Over in Afghanistan, the Taliban is claiming the bombing that killed 3 U.S. Marines, injured another 3. The only good news is that there was a civilian contractor had been reported killed. Apparently, he is alive. He's injured, but he is still alive. And, of course, General Scott Miller, who's commanding general of Resolute Support and U.S. Forces Afghanistan, is sending the usual platitudes. They volunteer to protect their country. We will continue our mission. Well, that may be getting a little bit dicey because just before we went to airtime, and this came out of defense.pk, the Taliban is claiming they have shot down a U.S. B-52 strategic bomber in Afghanistan, apparently while it was taking off from Shawab Air Base in Helmand Province. They basically announced that they targeted the B-52 with heavy weapons. The bomber went down and all its crew were killed. Now, no confirmation or comment by officials in Afghanistan or the U.S. yet. And that's going to be an embarrassment if they bagged a B-52. By heavy weapons, they mean artillery, not rockets. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is stressing once again the need for finding a political solution to the crisis in Syria in accordance with UN Resolution 2254. And during a press conference with his Jordanian counterpart Ayman al-Safadi in Amman, Lavrov said that countering terrorism should be done without double standards. He added the situation in al-Rukban camp is catastrophic, and the United States should allow displaced Syrians to leave it and return to their homes. And then he finished up by saying, we reject the U.S. President's decision on the occupied Syrian Golan, which flagrantly violates the UN Charter. And apparently from the White House, we're getting charter, schmarter, We're just making Israel happy. And that's all that matters. Okay, over in Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition is apparently continuing to pound Houthi targets in Yemen's capital. And it is a reminder that what is going on here is the attempt to reimpose puppet rule over Yemen. The U.S. had a successful regime change some years ago. The people of Yemen decided they did not like living under foreign puppet rule, something Americans are beginning to discover is very unpleasant relative to Israel. And so the people of Yemen kicked out their puppet rulers and reinstituted their own government, the Houthis. Well, in the eyes of the United States, well, those Houthis, they're the rebels. We have the internationally U.S. recognized government. They're the legitimate government. At one point, this so-called legitimate Yemen government was holding office on an abandoned car carrier ship tied up at a dock. So that's what's going on out there. And this has been going on since 2015. And this all started at the request of the puppet Yemeni President Abd Rabbu Mansur Hadi, who never won an election inside Yemen. He was anointed. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Oh, Layla in Canada. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. I imagine you have a lot to say about the election.
Actually, nothing unusual. I just wanted to add a little bit to what you said about the about Benny Gantz having been at one time in the lead. It was always neck and neck. Benny Gantz, what people don't realize is that Benny Gantz was chief of the army, the so-called Israel Defense Forces, that led both attacks on Gaza, where it was described as shooting fish in a barrel. So Benny Gantz is not exactly a pacifist. Yair Lapid was more of a pacifist, and he I don't think he was very high in the army, but he was a former TV anchor. And he's declared that he's going to turn the Knesset into a battlefield. But what actually happened was a lot of the right-wing parties petitioned Reuven Rivlin to go ahead and appoint Netanyahu as the prime minister, because the right-wing parties all had more seats in total. So, and you have to have 3.25% of the vote in order to remain a legitimate party within the Knesset.
Yes.
And for those that passed the threshold, the majority were right-wing parties, and they asked Reuven Rivlin to appoint Netanyahu. So there never really was much of a chance of any kind of left of center party. Even calling the Kahol Lavan left of center is a little bit of, I think, a misnomer. But in any case, I don't think it's really a surprise. This is the strategy that has been carefully worked out over 200 years, and they are going to take over the Middle East. The only resistance will come from Iran, if they're able to do it. And the pity is that the U.S. is going to suffer, well, all of North America is going to suffer huge repercussions.
Yes.
In every possible sphere of society and economy. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but the U.S. has always been a satellite of Israel, of the Zionists.
Yes.
Since 1865, when Jacob Schiff came here as the representative for the Rothschilds. And those who refer to Israel as Rothschild Israel, it always was the initial headquarters of the Rothschild global empire.
Yes.
But anyway, I've said nothing new that I haven't said before. And I just dread to think what's going to happen in the future. We're having trouble here in Canada too. The hippy-dippy little prime minister that we have has revealed himself to be a dictatorial egotist, empty of intellectual depth. So, and the Zionists, of course, have had huge control over Canada as well as the U.S. from the very beginning.
Yes.
So what's going to happen in North America is a little bit frightening, but not really surprising. But everyone should be prepared for unpleasant repercussions. So I wish you well. Have a good show, Mike, and hopefully I'll be getting back to my former project. So I won't be calling in again for a few months, but I'll be keeping track every now and then.
All right.
Take care and have a show.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll wait to have you come on back when your project is done. Yeah, the result really isn't that surprising. And it was always going to be, Netanyahu. But even if Gantz had won, it was not going to markedly change the situation relative to the Palestinians, because Gantz is just as hardline in that issue as Netanyahu. So I think Gilad Atzmon is right. It's actually going to be better for the Palestinians, or at least for Hamas, that Netanyahu did win, because it's going to galvanize opposition. And this is at a time when world opinion definitely is turning against Israel. As far as the Rothschilds are concerned, their influence is rooted in one simple thing. They have gained control of the money supply. And I forget which one of the Rothschilds it was who said it, but they said, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws." And that's exactly what's happened. Whether it's the Bank of International Settlements, or the Bank of England, or the Federal Reserve, once the Rothschilds have got control of that money, they decide what the country is going to do, because they can buy and sell the politicians. Okay, getting on back to our war zones. Over in Libya, Libya's GNA forces are striking Haftar army positions near Tripoli, and as a result, Haftar's blitzkrieg has bogged down, and the battle is now turning into what looks like it's going to be a prolonged siege of Tripoli. So it is getting very intense there. And according to pro-GNA sources, they have captured 34 LNA service members with their vehicles and destroyed at least one LNA battle tank. So it's getting very, very serious over there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Venezuela, because things are getting very ugly down there as well. Basically, everything the United States is doing down in Venezuela, first of all, it's illegal under international law, but the same can be said for what the U.S. has been doing in all these other places like Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, pardon me, Libya. But it's also very dangerous. And the U.S. is basically trying to simply get the world to say, yes, we agree with you. Juan Guaido is the new president of Venezuela, and that Maduro, he's just being a spoiled brat for not recognizing the obvious and leaving peacefully. The U.S. is clearly wishing to avoid a military incursion. I'm sure some of the cooler heads over there at the Pentagon, which Trump right now seems to be ignoring, are saying, yes, we don't do well in jungle warfare. This could be another long, drawn-out Vietnam, or it could be Syria 2.0. So apparently a U.S. aid official said anybody who doesn't think we need to be working on combat elements or working with special forces groups is just being naive. So they're out there pushing military intervention. Now, over at the Organization for American States yesterday, the Permanent Council voted under U.S. pressure to adopt a resolution installing Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido's representative Gustavo Tarre to the governing body and ejecting the representative of Maduro. Reporters asked the U.S. ambassador to the OAS, Carlos Trujillo, to specify what gave the council legal authority to recognize Gustavo Tarre as Venezuela's new representative, and apparently the U.S. ambassador was unable to give any kind of an explanation. We're just going to do it. We don't need an explanation. We're the United States. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, we've got the bag out. We've got the collection plate out there. And first of all, once again, our heartfelt thank you to those who are contributing. You are keeping us alive. You're keeping us on the air. And We know it's hard right now. We can already see the recession is starting, and people are very short on money, and it's actually very hard for me to ask for donations, either for myself or for RBN, because I know you guys are struggling just as much as we are. And of course, that's exactly where the government wants us. They want us all struggling just to get by, so we can't stand up and say, you know, we think these wars are a really stupid idea. And while we're on it, we're sick and tired of being lied to. So once again, for those of you who can support Republic Broadcasting, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And the network thanks you very much. I thank you very much. It's a war. It really is a war right now between the liars and those who think the truth should be heard. Getting on back down to the situation in Venezuela, the United Nations Security Council convened a hearing to discuss the crisis, and immediately there was a U.S. resolution out there basically saying Guaido is in, Maduro is out. Actually, the U.S. resolution demanded Maduro step down and new elections be held under international supervision, ignoring the fact that there was an election in Venezuela only last year with international observers that Maduro won. Now, Russia came up with a resolution that basically challenged part of the U.S. resolution. Part of the U.S. resolution was that Maduro has no right to refuse to allow U.S. aircraft and trucks across the border with, quote, humanitarian aid, end quote. And remember, one of the trucks was already found to contain materials that could be used to build barricades and other disruptive structures. So the Russian resolution reaffirmed the right of Venezuela's government, and in particular President Maduro, to coordinate aid deliveries to the Latin American country. In other words, you know, great if you want to send humanitarian aid, but you go where they tell you to go, and you are subject to their inspections, because their borders are sovereign. Okay, the United States in the Security Council took the opportunity to demand that the United Nations revoke the UN credentials of Maduro's government. So Mike Pence urged the United Nations to strip Nicolas Maduro's government off its UN credentials and to recognize Juan Guaido as the legitimate leader of the Latin American nation. Now, if the United Nations caves on this, and if they do, they're violating their own charter. It's going to lose what little remains of its credibility. Of course, after decades of being unable to rein in Israel, thanks to U.S. vetoes, it's not like the United Nations has much credibility. People look at the UN and say, what good are they? What can they do? You know, how are they making the world a better place? Now, the Russian envoy to the United Nations, when he had his turn at the Security Council microphone, was saying the United States has caused billions of dollars in damage to Venezuela since 2013. It artificially provoked this crisis to try and overthrow the legitimate government, while at the same time pretending to be humanitarian with a couple of truckloads full of materials to build barricades with. So it really is hypocritical. Okay, over in Turkey, they have announced that the delivery of Russia's S-400 system may be moved up, and that they're really not all that hot and bothered about getting the F-35 anyway, because the F-35 now appears to be a Turk-E. And I'm pretty sure the Turks understand, and most of the rest of the world understands, there is a problem there. 2 unexplained crashes already on the world's most expensive and really not all that good aircraft. So it's obvious Turkey is swinging toward Russia, the Russia sphere of influence. The U.S. is trying to threaten Turkey with expulsion from NATO, and Turkey might just shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, okay, we're out of NATO. We're going to go hang out with the Russians for a while. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Turning now to Israel. Israel has just decided they're going to confiscate hundreds of dunams, roughly 95 acres of Palestinian agricultural land in the northern Jordan Valley. Just walk on in and say, well, it used to be yours, now it's going to be ours. And apparently Israel is going to use the land to build new roads for the Israeli settlers. So they're getting a little bit arrogant over there. Under the Netanyahu era, more than 19,000 illegal settlement units have been built in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. And all of these are illegal under international law. And this gets back to what I was saying about the United Nations. If they can't get Israel in line, what good are they? You know, let's just shut down the United Nations, you know, take that building, convert it to condos. There is a housing shortage in New York after all. Because all these people are getting together and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk some more. But in the end, what have they actually accomplished that is good for planet Earth and, most importantly, good for peace? So, looking at this rights group, Peace Now, they're saying that 13,608 settlements units, about 70%, were built in isolated settlements which Israel might evacuate if a permanent deal is ever reached with the Palestinians. Well, that's optimistic. There's going to be no deal. With Netanyahu having won re-election, he's already said, we're going to annex the place. So remember all this time we kept hearing about, oh, how, you know, the Palestine wanted to wipe Israel off the map, and now we see it's been the other way around all along. Because once Israel annexes the West Bank, and Donald Trump gives it his imperial blessing, the only land that will still be technically Palestine will be Gaza. And Israel's not going to let that insult stand. Getting back to the West Bank, Airbnb has decided they are not going to implement their plan to delist Airbnb sublets in the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And so that means that the people who are running these sublets on stolen Palestinian land will still be able to make money off of them. Now, Airbnb is trying to make this look all hunky-dory by saying that their commissions from these sales will be donated to charity, and that makes it just okay for Airbnb to be an accessory to this misuse of stolen Palestinian land. And again, getting back to the United Nations, what good are they? Did you know that UNICEF declares itself as a proud supporter of Israeli settlements? Apparently, UNICEF is listed among the proud supporters of the Euro-Asia Interconnector. This is a project to build a 1,000-mile subsea cable linking the European electric grid with Israel via Greece and Cyprus. This means that Israel's illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and in the Golan Heights, would be linked to the European power network and would benefit from Israel's ability to trade electricity through the interconnector. So again, story coming on out from MiddleEastMonitor.com. Israel occupation forces have committed 150 violations against Palestinian journalists during the first quarter of this year. This came from the Journalist Support Committee just yesterday. And in a report, it said 66 violations were committed against journalists, including 43 during their coverage of the Great March of Return protests in the Gaza Strip. It said 10 were shot with live explosive bullets. I suspect they mean those butterfly bullets. 23 were hit directly with tear gas canisters. That's something the IDF thinks is funny. 6 fainted due to heavy inhalation of tear gas, and 4 were shot with rubber-coated metal bullets. Now, in response to all of these killings in Gaza of unarmed protesters, members of the European Parliament are calling on the European Union to review its association agreement with Israel. So members of the European Parliament from various political parties sent a letter to High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Federica Mogherini, calling for the revision of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. I'm willing to wager it will never happen. By the way, somebody texted me a message and said it was Mayor Rothschild who said, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws." Okay. China has just released an infographic, was published in the China Daily, republished by the Chinese news service Xinhua Net. And it basically goes back to the 21st century BC, showing all the archaeological evidence, documents, pottery shards, maps, everything, showing that Beijing does have an historic claim to the South China Sea. This infographic makes up a total of 9 panels. It is just full of all kinds of interesting information. And the Western press, of course, is already out there trying to say, well, this is nonsense, just pot shards, and, it's just junk. It doesn't really mean anything at all here. And in any event, this is the 21st century AD, and we've got all these other countries who want that territory, and they're willing to go to it. So the article that reported this, which was down in the Australian media, they reported on the infographic accurately, and it's an interesting infographic, then goes on to try and ridicule and trivialize the historical data and say it really isn't relevant in the context of, kicking up a bit of a prang with China here. All right, so let's go back to the Cairo Convention. This was a document signed at the end of World War II by the victorious Allies. And all of these nations who signed this document, which, by the way, includes the United States, all agreed that those islands in the South China Sea, which had been occupied by Japan during World War II, were taken away from Japan and returned to China. The Cairo Convention says this is Chinese territory, period, end of discussion. Unfortunately, we know that our current government has a bad habit of really pretending previous treaties don't matter anymore. That was then, this is now, and we're going to go on in and just do what we want to do. Now, the latest justification for ignoring the Cairo Convention and ignoring all the historical precedent for that being the South China Sea, note the name, the South China Sea, is this came out in Bloomberg saying, well, intelligence officials, that if China has access to that part of the South China Sea, they will target the globe's underwater internet cables, of which quite a number do go through the area. But that's the new justification. We have to chase China out of that area in order to protect the underwater internet cables. Well, what makes you think China is the only one that could possibly be trying to tap into and listen to those cables? If you go back to Dr. John Craven, he wrote this wonderful book on the Silent Service, and he talks about some of the amazing things done by the U.S. Submarine Service, including locating a sunken Russian submarine using a modified USS Halibut. One of the other things he talks about, again, using this submarine that had this underwater hatch, is planting listening devices on Russian telecommunication cables. So it's a little bit disingenuous for the U.S. to come on out and say, well, we're concerned that China will listen to underwater internet cables, because if anybody's going to listen in on the internet, it'll be the United States and the National Security Agency. But again, that's part of the propaganda out there to justify. It's another big lie. Saddam's nukes, Assad's sarin gas, China's eavesdropping, and on and on and on and on. Over in North Korea, their ruling party is holding a meeting amid the current tense situation. And apparently Kim Jong-un chaired a Politburo meeting just a day ago to discuss ways to make progress under the prevailing tense situation. Now, in his mind, progress, of course, is to reunify eventually with South Korea and get rid of the sanctions and remove the United States as a military threat to his territory. And they got really, really close. They got so close. And then Trump, probably pushed by Bolton and Pompeo, just kind of wrecked it. So what's the end result? Moon Jae-in is heading to Washington, D.C. Kim Jong-un is turning toward Moscow. Just like the good old days when this Korean War got started back in the 50s. Yeehaw! We'll be able to bring back MASH, the TV series, an updated version. Won't that be wonderful? And we've already got, advertising clients, be all the military recruiters. Say, see, isn't war fun? This is all good for the defense contractors. I was having a conversation with somebody. Claire and I had to go to the shopping mall the other day. Now, the shopping mall is someplace we tend not to go to unless it's necessary. We don't believe in recreational walking around the mall, looking at all the things we can't possibly afford to buy. And especially with Claire's back injury, doing a lot of walking isn't an issue anyway. But I happened to stop in. First of all, there were a lot of retail vacancies. I mean, a lot. We were shocked. I mean, we're used to seeing a few here, but this was just amazing. And I stopped into one of the stores that I normally frequent, and its shelves were all half empty. And I said, are you guys going out of business? And they said, no. They actually have 2 storefronts in the mall, and they're just going to consolidate the 2 storefronts to save on rent. And I said, well, when is that going to happen? And he said, well, it was supposed to have already happened, but mall management actually asked us to stay until June. So, because they're so concerned about how many vacant spaces there already are. And there are a lot. So, it's all illusion there. And anyway. So the military contractors, they're going to be doing good. And I asked the guy in the store, I said, does it feel like the recession is hit? And he said, well, there's a retail recession, no doubt. But he says, that's because of the online sales. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but I just joked with him. I said, well, there's no recession over at the defense contractors. And he said, no, I imagine not. And on a more serious note, we're hearing just a lot of training flights overhead, just rattling the windows. So it's getting very, very real for those of us out here in the middle of the Pacific. And Claire and I are really, really going to try and get back to the Midwest toward the end of summer. We're probably going to have to just abandon most of our belongings here and just, take the computers and Claire's musical instruments and just book for the mainland. But it's getting that desperate out here. We just can't afford to live here anymore is what it is. Okay, over in Japan, or actually off the coast of Japan, they are confirming the missing F-35 crashed. They have discovered some debris floating in the ocean. They think the remains of the aircraft is sunk in about 5,000 feet of water. And nobody knows what happened. What happened so quickly The pilot couldn't get off any kind of a message. The pilot is still missing, presumed dead at this point, because if he'd been able to eject, as you know, those ejection seats, they've got a little life raft that you can get into, and there is a radio beacon you can turn on where people can come and get you. So this is the second mysterious crash of an F-35. It's the first one outside of the United States, and it's really rattled a lot of people. Japan has grounded their entire fleet of F-35As. And again, the F-35 is the most expensive U.S. military program ever. Here's where it gets interesting. Last year, there was a report by the Project on Government Oversight claiming that senior officials involved in developing the F-35 concealed dangerous flaws in its design instead of fixing them in order to avoid paying cost overruns on what was already an enormously expensive project. A 2018 Government Accountability Office report showed the plane had 111 Category 1 deficiencies. These are problems that impact its combat readiness, as well as pose the risk of death, severe injury, loss, or major damage to the aircraft. So here we have another classic Pentagon program, and who knows, maybe somebody will make a comedy film about this the way they did about the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. You have the senior officers involved in developing the aircraft. They know there are dangerous flaws, and they cover them up because they don't want to have the cost overruns, because that looks bad, because it's already hideously over budget. Then you have this other accountability report saying it had 111 of these serious deficiencies that impact combat readiness, risk the life of the pilots, severe injury, loss of the aircraft, or major damage, which now appears to have happened at least twice. Now the race is on to find the remains of this stealth jet, which is presumably in 5,000 feet of water. And the U.S. military is out there. I imagine by now they have sent out probably, I forget which one is ported on the West Coast. There are two of these DSRVs and their support ships. There's Avalon is the one on the West Coast. That's probably already halfway to Japan by now. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, more about the F-35. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the F-35 built by Lockheed Martin, and I can just imagine over there in Seattle, the Boeing people are going, whew, yeah, somebody else is on the hot seat now. And so they're trying to find the remains of this F-35, which is somewhere in the Pacific, 5,000 feet down. They're not sure exactly where, because aircraft generally don't have sonar transmitters, transducers on them. And they're going to have to basically go from where they found the floating debris and analyze the ocean currents and go back and start their search there. Maybe get Robert Ballard out there. They're saying it's a race now because China and Russia have naval assets in the area. They're probably going to be looking for the remains of the F-35. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe prestige. You know, getting on back to Don Craven and that submarine that they located with the underwater camera, that was the same submarine that was later partially plucked from the floor of the ocean by Howard Hughes' Glomar Explorer. And they didn't get what they wanted to get. They didn't get the nuclear missile. They didn't get any torpedoes. They got some plumbing. And yet, when they finally reported to Congress on what they had gotten from all this huge amount of money they'd spent to build the Glomar Explorer, they were acting like, you know, these were pieces of the Holy Grail, you know, this bits of rusted pipe. And it really was rather worthless, because even back then it was known that Russian metallurgy was inferior to that of the U.S. So they're out there looking for this thing. And apparently there are currently, at least on the U.S.-Japanese side, 8 ships and 7 aircraft including a U.S. Navy P-8 Orion maritime patrol plane, are looking for traces of the jet. I saw a comment, about somebody saying, well, if they recover that plane, Russia and China could reproduce that jet. Why would they want to? It's a turkey. It can be out dogfought by 70s vintage aircraft. They've already, during the development stage, they had some of the prototypes up there trying to dogfight like F-15s, and they got their rear ends waxed. Over in Great Britain, they're considering grounding their F-35B stealth fighters for a second time until somebody can figure out what's behind these mysterious 2 crashes. 1 crash, maybe an error, maybe a pilot problem. 2 crashes, no, we got to find. Is there a problem? It's like with the 737 MAX. Is there something that is built into the aircraft? And again, going back to those reports that came out yesterday, yes, the people running this program know that there are serious design deficiencies in the aircraft. And they sent them out there anyway. They're shipping defective product. Now, it's one thing when you ship a defective toaster over to the big box store and it doesn't work, and somebody can bring it back for a refund. When you're talking about this kind of hardware at this kind of cost, that's a bit different. We got to take a break for station identification. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we've got callers on the line, so let's start with Nancy in Amarillo. Aloha, Nancy, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to say that I've been listening to RBN for 10 or 12 years, and I just sent them a $100 donation.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. And I wish everybody else would do something like that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that solicitation, and thank you for the kind words. And I hope you go on listening for another 12 years.
Me too. I'm getting kind of old.
Yeah, well, that's same here.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Here, we're going to let you go and switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, if they don't find a plane, that means it's super stealthy. If they do find the plane, it isn't stealthy.
Well, it's not supposed to be stealthy underwater. It's supposed to be stealthy when it's up in the sky.
Yeah, I bet you a couple of those pieces are going to be on California shore sooner or later, along with some Fukushima radiation, huh?
Well, I'll certainly keep an eye on our beaches to see if anything interesting washes on up here. But I'm sure the floating debris has already been collected up. What they're looking for is the airframe. And I wonder if they're going to really try and identify what's wrong with the aircraft, or they're going to assign blame, because one of the articles that I looked at regarding this incident made a point of saying that this particular aircraft was the first one that was assembled at the Mitsubishi plant. Apparently these aircraft are shipped across in pieces, and then they're put together there in Japan for their use, which is a very common thing to do. In fact, here on Oahu, up in the middle of the island, there's actually an underground hangar because the warplanes were sent out here disassembled. And then in that underground hangar, they were assembled and then either flown out to the carriers or to the various airfields. So that's a common thing to do. But if they're already mentioning this was the first one assembled by Mitsubishi, then it looks like somebody wants to set up Mitsubishi to take the fall for this.
But if they're all assembled in pieces and every state is making a piece, the plane's still not going to be fit together properly. I wonder when they got all the pieces and started putting them together, like, what the heck?
Well, they're basically assembled here in the United States into subunits, and it's not that unrealistic, because if you look at the FA-18, that was actually built in 2 different sections, literally in opposite sides of the country, and they bring them together, and they just went together like a glove. It can be done with good engineering and good quality control, good process control. The issue here again appears to be that this airplane had problems right from the get-go, and the officers who were in charge of it just tried to cover it up rather than admit that they had basically failed. And someday they'll make a movie about it, just like they did with the Pentagon Wars. And if you haven't seen that movie, you need to hunt that down.
And the F-16 wire shaping movie by General Dynamics.
Yes.
They tried to cover that up too. Yeah. Hey, Mike, I wanted to switch gears if I still got time about, well, like, Erdogan says the S-400's a done deal. It's a done deal, but I don't know if anybody who listens to the show listened to the whole thing, but they says that there's probably going to be a joint military venture into manufacturing something. So can that mean like a plane? Because I know parts of the F-35, aren't they made in Turkey, some of the parts?
I really don't know. I don't see the advantage of having parts of the F-35 made in Turkey. Generally, the way these programs are done is they try and parcel it out to as many of the U.S. states as they can in order to win congressional approval for whatever the program is.
Yeah, because from what I listened to, they said something is assembled or put together in Turkey. Since it's part of NATO, they allowed Turkey to put some kind of parts together. But I'm thinking if they cancel the F-35, because what Turkey ordered, like 20-something, and they got 2 sitting in Arizona or something. Now, if the deal don't go through, won't they just say, you know what, we don't want your F-35, we'll just take the Su-35 from Russia. Maybe there'll be a joint venture where they manufacture part of that plane or parts of a certain plane, in Turkey, and just cancel the whole deal with the F-35. Hopefully they'll get their $1.5 billion back or $1 trillion back or whatever it costs. But that's what from what I listened to, that's what they said.
Okay, well, I think what may have been happening is that some of the U.S.-made components for the F-35s had been delivered to Turkey ahead of, completing the deal, the same thing that they were doing with Japan. By the way, I just got an update on the story, and apparently the pilot of the Japanese F-35 did send a single signal before his plane vanished from the radar, and it simply said, abort the mission. So something went wrong. They still haven't found the pilot. They haven't found the majority of the wreckage. They're just finding bits and pieces floating on the ocean.
Yeah, that's a shame to send out some kind of crappy plane like that. That plane's got serious engine problems. Because, with the multi-role, with the VTOL they wanted and all this other stuff. I mean, Japan should have never took that plane in, but, due to business and this or that, and,
Okay, well, this version of the F-35 is not the VTOL version. This is the F-35A.
Oh, so there's more than one. I just thought there was one version where it had VTOL capability.
No. There's a couple of different variants on the platform. Why carry all that extra weight and spend all that extra money unless you intend to use it on a carrier? If you're just going to use it from an airfield, you don't need that. You could use the extra space for more ammunition and so forth. The F-35 is notorious for having very little room for ammunition for their cannon.
That doesn't have a suffocation problem like the F-22 does it?
Not that it's been reported so far.
That's just a shame, though. That plane is not a good plane. All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. There is no question. It's a boondoggle. And people have been saying it's a boondoggle for a very, very long time. But because there is so much money tied up in it that is flowing out to all these defense contractors in all the states, Congress won't do anything about it. They just sit there and say, yeah, it's expensive, but oh, well, we've put this much money into it. We can't quit now. And it is. It's looking like this is going to be just a worse U.S. military aviation project than the Goblin. And you have to be my age to remember that one. But again, going back last year, there were 2 different government reports saying that the senior officers in charge of development of the F-35 knew of serious design deficiencies in the airframe. And instead of asking for it to be repaired, it's just hushed it up because they didn't want to admit that there were problems and ask for more cost overruns. And then you had that other report that identified 111 Category 1 problems with the aircraft. Those things should not be allowed into the air. And I hope those pilots are collecting full combat pay, because they're in a lot of danger just climbing into that thing. I mean, I'm an aviation enthusiast. I love flying. I took flying lessons when I was a kid. I've been up in some very fast aircraft. You would not get me into an F-35 for all the tea in China. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here now. Patty in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, I want to comment on something you said about 2 days ago. Okay, so Iran is now, they were having terrible flooding in parts of their country.
Yes.
And you said that other countries cannot send aid to them because of the U.S. sanctions.
That's right. The United States will not waive the sanctions for humanitarian aid.
Okay, but what I don't understand is, just because the U.S. places sanctions on a country, why does every other country have to obey those sanctions?
Because they're afraid the United States will then sanction them.
Yeah, but then there's no end to this. I mean, are you telling me that of all the men in this world, no one is capable of being a real man?
Well,
standing
actually,
up to the bully.
It's a little more complex than that, because the U.S. is using sanctions so much that it's causing the rest of the world to start to break away from the U.S. dollar and the SWIFT system. And they're setting up their own banking interconnect systems, and they're going back to their own native currencies. And in the long run, this overuse of sanctions is a very self-destructive policy for the United States. But right now, for those poor people in Iran who got hit with those really horrific floods, it is a bit of a problem. And it shows to the rest of the world just how hard-hearted the United States government has become. Because it's one thing to have sanctions when you think there might be nuclear weapons or biological weapons. But when you're talking about saying, no, you can't send in humanitarian aid because we don't like them, and on behalf of Israel, we're going to invade them soon anyway, that basically just, that shows a face of America to the rest of the world that is not very flattering.
Yeah, but the sanctions go beyond just not allowing humanitarian aid. The sanctions are strangling the economy of one country after another.
Yes.
Okay, but the thing is, why can't Russia send aid? They're already sanctioned up the kazoo.
Oh, you see, I'm sure that Russia probably already is. The countries that we're talking about that are saying they're blocked from sending aid are the ones that are still in the Western sphere of influence.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I'm sure. You mean China and Russia?
I'm sure they're already sending some aid. I'm sure they're already sending in some help to try. I think it's something like 1,900 villages in Iran got wiped out in these floods.
Okay, so as long as there are countries that are able to trade and help Iran, so it's not every country that's obeying these sanctions.
No, it isn't. It isn't. As a matter of fact, Iran's oil exports are actually up.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay.
And we're going to switch over to, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Aiea Mustafa in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Man, this is Aiea Mustafa. I haven't been online with y'all for a while now, but I got some exclusive news for you, and you're gonna break this worldwide.
Okay.
I'm a single father of 3 teenage girls, right? And I sent my teenage girl to visit my oldest teenage daughter, who was 17 at the time. I sent her in 2017 to visit her mother, and her mother ended up kicking her out, putting her homeless on the street. I found out that my daughter was homeless up in the ghetto in Philadelphia, and was 6 months pregnant, squatting in a house on an air mattress with nothing but a plug-up electric heater. She emailed me with tears in her face, photos and everything. Me and her other 2 daughters, and her 2 sisters, my other 2 daughters, we go 2 days ago, we go up to Philly. We find her in the middle of a West Philly ghetto in basically an almost abandoned house with nothing on but underwear. 6 months pregnant, broke and naked and everything. Looked like she was on crack and everything. So we bring my daughter home where she belongs. We go and buy her new clothes, socks and everything, clean her up, right? So I take my daughters out to the mall, hang out with them. We go out to Golden Corral yesterday and everything. And how about 9 p.m. yesterday night, the FBI swarmed my house with a tactical task force. Swarmed my house about me bringing my daughter home from finding her homeless in the streets. Now, mind you, I got all of her ID here, birth certificate, social security, and everything. The FBI, a federal SWAT tactical task force, swarmed my house, chased my daughters around the house, and put assault rifles in my teenage daughter's faces last night. This is in my Midwest property.
Well, who filed the complaint? Who said that you did something wrong? I mean, she's your daughter. It's not like you're taking...
Yeah, here's the thing, right? My daughter has psychological issues. When I got her here, I went down to the family court in this county, in Stark County, Ohio. I went to the family court and explained to them what her situation is. She's been a problematic child all her life. They said she needs to see somebody because it sounds like she's delusional. She has a very violent history. Here's the thing. I made the mistake of having kids by a little, what they would call a ghetto hood rat welfare queen in the ghetto in Philly. This is the same woman who put my child out on the street and put her out homeless almost 2 years ago. She's been out there on and off homeless all this time. When they find out I bring my daughter home, clean her up and everything, the FBI wouldn't tell me who called, but if you would have seen the way that these people stormed my house like the 82nd Airborne, dogs, armored vehicles or whatever it was, tactical vests, helmets, everything, the whole nine. Ran up in here with me and my 3 teenage daughters.
Well, that's because they're not allowed to, go on over and storm the offices of the Clinton Foundation. They got to do something to look like they're, worth their paychecks there. They're not allowed to go after the drug lords. They're not allowed to go after the politicians. We'll go harass, the parents who are trying to save their kids and everything because, we're the FBI.
Exactly. I couldn't believe it. I mean, and the way they came down, you would have thought I was Osama bin Laden or something like that. My daughter, they called, my daughter told them she was fine and everything. We was out eating. I showed them pictures of them laughing, videos and everything. But apparently the people who put my daughter out on the streets in the ghetto in West Philadelphia had a problem with the fact that her father was coming to save her, get her out of the ghetto, bring her home where she had a roof over her head, clothes on her back, food and everything. And because I did that, the FBI is now, my daughter has been gone since she was underage, almost 2 years. She's up here at 17, was supposed to come back a month later, visit her mom. While she's been out there in the streets, she's had 2 birthdays. She's 19 now. So the FBI...
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. Where is that daughter right now?
I don't know. The FBI came and took her from me. They won't tell me where she's at or nothing. I've been calling them and everything. They won't tell me where she's at or anything. They got her. I thought they was arresting her for something.
Okay,
she had a tendency to get in trouble with the law.
Okay, you need to get yourself a lawyer who's good at family law. I don't know what your financial situation is, and I know lawyers are expensive. You need to file a writ of habeas corpus, which is an order that compels it basically means provide the body. Show me where this person is right now.
I know what the habeas is, but they're gonna try. I guess they don't even count no more since the NDAA, right? It's just amazing though that they did that. Like I couldn't believe that.
This doesn't qualify. This doesn't qualify under NDAA. The question is she in some kind of family services organization? Has she been returned to the mother? Has she been returned to the people who put her out on the street? Which would, of course, make the FBI accessories to kidnapping and pimping.
Yeah, the mother's the one who put her out on the street. Listen, Mike. As soon as I got home with my child, the very first thing I did was get on the phone and call my ex-wife, call her mother. I said, hey, do you know what's going on? Do you know where I found my daughter at? She had no idea where she was at. She said she didn't live with me a month. I said, do you know she's pregnant? She didn't even know she was pregnant. This is America.
This is just absolutely insane. All right, you need a lawyer, okay? I'm just a talk show radio host. I'm not a lawyer. I've never even played one in a movie.
I know. I called you because I wanted to break it with you because the last time I talked to you on the phone, I'm the same guy who in 2006 was put in prison for almost a decade for surviving a violent home invasion. Me and my wife and kids, these same girls who were smaller at the time, who fought off a violent home invader, we were charged with robbing our own house and destroying our own property. And I was put in jail for kidnapping the birds out of my house for almost 10 years. So I'm the same guy.
This is insane. You need a lawyer. Okay?
Yeah,
That's
I'm
the
also
best
right
advice
about
I
all
can
this
get you.
one.
You need a lawyer, and you need a writ of habeas corpus.
Okay, Mike. I just wanted to let y'all know, but let all your listeners look out for my book. I'm a writer, and I'm writing a book about all the things they've been doing to me for the last 20 years. Chronological order of injustices bestowed against just me. The book is called A Testament to Justified Rage. Look out for it, Mike. I'll make sure you get a copy first.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, and thank you for the phone call.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. We're going to let you go here. All right. Now, the phone lines are open. Getting on back to the news. Richard Lugar, the Richard Lugar Center in Tbilisi is suspected of being a biological weapons laboratory. Now, there are treaties saying you're not supposed to be messing around with this stuff. And the U.S. signed this treaty. They have not complied with all of its provisions, in particular, destruction of existing stockpiles. So we need to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as a matter of fact, one of our listeners just emailed me this post from reliefweb.int confirming that, yes, Russia and a lot of other countries are, in fact, getting humanitarian relief aid to the Iranian flood survivors. And apparently it is a huge mess, much worse than we're seeing in our Midwest, although that may get worse because of the new storm that's coming on in. So apparently Russia has already sent 4,000 tents, blankets, and folding beds to its regional station in the Armenian capital, Yerevan. The Russian government created the center in 2015 in the city in a bid to serve as a regional basis for humanitarian aid for Armenia and surrounding countries. So apparently that is the staging point. So the aid is on the way. It's going to get on in there. All right, we've got a bunch of callers on the line. I'm going to put this biological weapon story on hold until we clear the phone lines again. Donald from Russia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Oh, boy, a number of things. First of all, what got my attention that I'm calling was your difficulty last Thursday, discouragement.
Yes.
And I share that discouragement. So it's not sympathy, it's empathy. You're not alone.
Yeah, I got a lot of emails saying exactly the same thing. And, it's the difference. The corporate media people, they're there because they get paid and a lot of money. And they don't care about what they're reporting on. They're disconnected emotionally. They see the pictures, they read the words, and then it's out of their mind, and they go home and they're happy. Those of us who are out here trying to make things better, unfortunately, we can, and we shouldn't, but we can sometimes allow ourselves to get emotionally caught up in what it is we're seeing happening before our eyes. And it does get overwhelming after a while, and especially after 25 years of working to try and make things better and seeing them get worse. Yeah, it gets a little bit discouraging.
But how awful when they're talking about collusion. Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you just fine. Please continue.
Well, I've lived in Russia spring and fall for the last 20 years.
Okay.
But talking about collusion, and look what's going on with Israel. And the involvement, their involvement in our elections, in our government, and Trump involved in their elections and government, so much collusion, and it's
yeah, but the attitude is, Israeli collusion is good and Russian collusion is bad.
But on another important thing that you brought up with Iran, and I don't know if you got the background, like the Shiites. So many Shiite mosques have been blown up in Pakistan. It's a Shiite against Sunni is a terrible conflict. And of course, the problem in Russia has a very high Sunni population, and you've heard about all the terrorists blowing up buses and trains near us here, and it's a lot better now. Putin is doing a good job, but the cooperation with Iran is because they can use Russian security and Iranian security can work together with some of the jihadi threats from Shiite Islam. That's just a working, relationship there. But what I really wanted to talk from a personal perspective, what I learned, I'm 79, I'll be 80 in September.
Okay, happy birthday.
I took leave, thank you. I took leave of absence. I was working on nuclear ceramics at carborundum research back in the 60s.
Okay.
And I took a leave of absence to go to the University of Buffalo to finish a degree in mathematical physics. And I worked together with a bunch of engineering students. They had to take the hard math like I did. They didn't take the easy courses like the pre-med students, but in the social sciences, they
liberal arts,
much easier course. But here was a bunch of these engineering students who were getting money working on a project with the medical university. Those were the first large computers. They had the CDC 6400, and they were working on a research project to make a really high quality, low cost annual physical exam, and it would all computerizing it all, where you would go in and give a sample of your pee or poop and all that, and then you'd come back after the laboratory analysis.
Okay, Donald, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to put you on hold. Do not hang up. We have to take a break for commercials, but I want to come back and hear the rest of your story. So stay tuned. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Donald from Russia, and Donald was talking about early development of computerized medical testing systems. And of course, the systems they have today are rather amazing, but they don't really do the diagnosis because the doctors don't want to lose their nice cushy jobs to the machine. In any event, I'd be very concerned considering the software errors that we have seen in some of those systems. Right now, medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the United States, and I wonder how many of those are because of faulty software. Anyway, Donald, so coming back up to the present day, what is it that you wanted to share with us?
Well, these engineering students that had an assistantship on this project were we would work together and at the library. One day they were so discouraged they had lost their job, and it was because the only place they needed a doctor was to read the printout. The printout would say what the probability of any disease, what to take, what it conflicts with, all that. But the AMA shut it down, and they lost their job. And that's when I learned why, when I in the late 40s, the doctor would come to the house where I grew up in New York,
yes,
in a country farm town. And here I learned that the AMA had got political control over the class size of our universities.
Yeah.
And I learned, like, Trump is cooperating with them now, with the AMA. You can taxpayers have to pay for if a veteran wants to go to a private doctor, they have to let them go now. The AMA has done a terrible job on the veterans hospitals. Nobody seems to know that. But they'll let they only get something like $200,000, $180,000 a year salary. They don't want any American doctor doing that. I had a Muslim woman from Pakistan as my doctor, and of course, after that psychiatrist followed the Quran and killed all them people, I put in a complaint because the Quran told her to cut my head off if I don't submit. They gave me another doctor. At any
Well,
rate,
I understand how that works. The last time I had a regular, GP, my doctor, she was from Russia as well. So it is a bit of a mess. The AMA is less about medical care and more about enforcing the orthodoxy of the medical industrial complex, which has really gone downhill ever since Nixon signed the Health Maintenance Organization bill as a favor to his friends over at Kaiser. And of course, the Veterans Affairs has never been very good about taking good care of our wounded veterans. It's a scandal. And every once in a while, the corporate media will make a big deal about how the paperwork is still not computerized and veterans are having to wait months for treatment. And it really is a huge mess. And yeah, I remember a time when you were sick or wounded, you went right to the doctor, you were taken care of, that was it. I remember one time when my father was ill, the doctor made a house call. And it worked very smoothly. Today, it's just so messed up and mired with paperwork and regulation. When Claire suffered her back injury, it's about 14 months ago. No, 15 months ago. It's been 15 months. When she suffered a fracture in her back, it was 3 months before we could get anybody to take a look at her and see what the heck was going on. So for 3 months, it was just, keeping her still, keeping her comfortable, using as much OTC pain medication as we could. She really suffered because of the deficiencies of our medical system. And we're in a medical group. We have Medicare. We have a supplemental. We have all the bases covered, and it was still 3 months before she could get seen for a critical back injury. And I'm very unhappy about that. As a matter of fact, Claire, unfortunately, is having to go back to the doctors today. I think the long delay in being seen by a doctor has resulted in chronic damage that would have been avoided had she been seen in a more timely manner.
One other part of that, my mother, back in the 90s, the medical, there was an insurance company in Florida that, and like there was one for in New York for a short period of time that had doctors on salary. I don't know if you heard about that. I think it was Aetna in Florida that had the
I think
program.
so, yes.
The AMA got that shut down, but they were saving so much money by having their doctors on salary that my mother didn't have to pay the copay. And the AMA shut that down.
Yep.
It's a crime against humanity. Hillary actually was, when Bill was president, she was working to confront the AMA. And in a way, Obama was working to confront it, not straightforward, but undermine it to get everybody insurance, and then they go after the doctors because they're charging so much. But
well,
at any rate, thank you very much.
They are, but part of that is because of the high cost of malpractice insurance, and it is a mess. There's no question about it. Anyway, listen, Donald, spasiba for the phone call.
Are making money, and the pharmacists.
Okay, well, Donald, I got to let you go. The phone lines are really filling up, and thank you very much for the phone call. I think this is the first time I've ever gotten a phone call from Russia, and I'm just so glad you weren't KGB or something like that. Before we go back to the phones here, a little bit of a comment. I did get an email of complaint because I was talking about the opioid crisis in this country and talking about the pharmaceutical corporations who are incentivizing doctors, the doctors who write the prescriptions. And I, at some point, apparently made a loose comment about there being very little difference between the pharmacist at the drugstore and the guy on the street corner. And I got an email from a pharmacist who works at a drugstore who was very insulted and said, look, we just fill the prescriptions. They are only following our orders. The problem is the pharmaceutical corporations who are pushing these products, who are incentivizing the doctors to write prescriptions for things that patients may not really need. More about that later in the show. And so to all the pharmacists out there, I apologize. You are just part of the pipeline. but there is a problem. Okay, back to the phones here. Michael in Canada. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there, Mike. Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Well, you sounded pretty bad last Thursday there. I was getting ready to call the Ackerman on you.
No, I'm definitely getting better.
That's good. Yeah, like I got a couple things here in your show yesterday. I got to mention this so everybody, all your listeners, understand this. I'm in Canada. You said that in Quebec, all the signs are in French and English.
Yep.
Because we've got bilingualism. Well, Canada's a bilingual country, but the provinces are some of them aren't. Now in Quebec, all the signs are in French. You go on the subway, there's no English anyplace. Street signs, everything, there's no English. The only province that is bilingual is the shitty little province I live in of New Brunswick, where you have to be bilingual. It's an officially bilingual province. You got to be bilingual to hold a government job. And the result of that, we got a bunch of people from Quebec living in this province, you know, because they're bilingual. In Quebec, there's no bilingualism. It's all French. The Canadian government, the federal government, it's officially bilingual. But the provinces, like I said, Quebec is not bilingual. They're French only. New Brunswick is bilingual, and all the other provinces of Canada are not bilingual.
Okay, so you're telling me that I erred in saying that there was a province in Canada where the signs had to be both in French and English.
Well, you said Quebec.
Okay, well, I understand I may have erred in saying Quebec. Are there any provinces in Canada where the signs are mandated to be both in French and English?
Yes, New Brunswick.
That's the only one.
Yes, the other provinces are not. If you go to Alberta, it's all English. British Columbia, it's all English.
Gosh darn that, Michael Moore lied to us in Canadian bacon.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Anyway, there's something else, a little humorous thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
Might be off topic here a bit, but last week you're still talking about the Mueller report.
Yes.
So on my way home from work, I always stop in this little grocery store, and they always got CNN on, you know. And I remind you, I'm in Canada, right?
Yeah.
And the CNN's always on, and I'm in the queue there to line up to pay for my stuff, and the people are talking, boy, we're going to get Trump. Oh, we're going to get Trump. We got him now. And it's just, and I get up to the girl and I say, you know, this is all smoke and mirrors. You know, there's no collusion with Russia and all that. Anyway, you go in there now and the TV's shut off. TV's not even on. Yeah, and the lady won't even look me in the eye.
Yeah, our local bank branch is the same way. You know, when this whole thing was going on, they had CNN all the time. Now it's the baking channel, which to me that's more useful.
Oh yeah, it just goes to show you that these people realize they were lied to all this time. We're going to get Trump. Oh yeah, we got him now, and we're in Canada, and these are Canadians saying, using the word we. Yeah, we got him now. We're going to get him now. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, well, have a good show there, Mike. Nice talking to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day to you, Michael. Yeah, Michael, I want to clarify something yesterday that happened. After I called you, you had a Hispanic lady called in and saying that Cubans are Europeans. Well, you know what? She's absolutely right. They're Spanish. They come out of the country of Spain, which is part of European culture. But I want to clarify something with her and then your listeners. Okay, the Cubans are very, very hard workers, especially when they came here with the Peter Pan flight. Okay, they were working 18 to 20 hours a day. I know all about the Cubans. Okay, I can tell you everything about them. And I've been there many a times. They worked their butts off, and they didn't have food stamps, Section 8 housing, and welfare. And they learned to speak English, and they are very anti-communist. So I'm sure that lady understands that. The people who live, the Cubans who live in South Florida are very patriotic. They love their country, which is their new country, the United States of America. So I clarify that. I know about Franco, and I know about the during World War II, the Franco was fighting the communists and all that. I can go into all the detail, but I won't do that. But we'll go into this detail, Michael. These Hispanics are coming over here now, are getting Section 8 housing, they're getting food stamps, and they're putting 35 to 40 kids in a classroom. They don't speak no English. The American taxpayers paying for this. The Cubans who came here through the Peter Pan flights and all that, okay, they learned to speak English because that was the only way to survive, to get a job in Miami-Dade County at the time. In Miami-Dade County at the time, you got powdered milk, you got peanut butter and jelly, and you got maybe a loaf of bread from a Wholesome Bakery every week. And sometimes you get it stale, because I knew a lot of Cubans that didn't have a chicken to put in their pan until they actually got a job, and they were working 18, 20 hours. I can tell you all kinds of stories about it. But that lady who's saying that, I know more about Hispanics probably than she does, and I know more about Spain and Isabella and the Inquisition and everything. I go back into history if you want to go into that detail, but I won't do that. I will tell you what's going on now in this country. In this country, we are being invaded illegally.
Yes.
People are breaking the law. The Democratic Party is allowing this. They should be held for treason, aiding and abetting the sedation. And Michael, what you said yesterday blew my mind. It was the wonderful thing I heard actually you say in a really long time. I mean, I love everything you say, but when you told me about how rich Mexico is, what their minerals and their beachfront properties and everything that Mexico really has, their oil, and it's like Venezuela. None of these Hispanic countries, they're not Latins. By the way, Michael, none of these people down there are Latins. The Latins are out of Rome. The Italian people are the Romans. They're not. They have nothing to do with Latin. When they say I'm a Latin, no. Unless you're born in Italy, you're not. Maybe you're from Scotland and Ireland. They have Latin in them. But the people coming out of Spain are Hispanic.
Yes.
Okay? There's no question. That's all been a big farce. But going back to that lady, I hope she understands. I know more about how the Cubans had to fight and get their and all the property they own and the prosperity the prosperity they've gained in this country because they love this country. That's fine. But Michael, when you got all these people are coming in here now, what are you going to do with these people? There's no jobs. What are they going to? What's their skill level? There's too many people. There's not enough agricultural jobs to put them in. There's too many people cutting grass right now. Matter of fact, pretty soon they have robots cutting grass pretty soon.
Yes.
That's coming in new lawnmowers. So I mean, what's going on here? And then I'm feeling like I was just trying to tell that lady we can't keep absorbing all this influx.
No,
because
we can't.
Right now we have a problem in our own American society. Okay, now Mexico's a big place, and they can Venezuela, another big place. They have minerals, they have oil. Cuba, believe it or not, has oil too, Michael. It's not as clean like Venezuela, but they have resources in Cuba, believe it. They're in sugar and all that, and But what I understand is our government, Trump, and all these ex-presidents, they allowed this invasion for what reason? To fill up the classrooms of 45 kids per class? No, it's crazy. And then that one caller you had in there calling about Russian collusion. I always kept saying it wasn't a Russian collusion; it was the Israeli collusion. Look at Hollywood. Who's running Hollywood? Who's controlling Hollywood? The filthy movies, most of the filthy movies they put out, and all the other nonsense that are taken. You got Schiff. You got Chucky Schumer doesn't want Israel to have 10 million Muslims going to Israel. Would he like 10 million Muslims to sneak into Jerusalem or Tel Aviv? Or take over the Golan Heights, put 10 million Muslims on the Golan Heights or the Sinai? Come on. Who's kidding whom here? But no, in this country, you got that Jerry Nadler, and you got all these schmucks that want to have our country being invaded. Pelosi, that moron, and that Maxine knucklehead Waters. And they don't see that. Well, you know what? I say, why don't we take 10,000 illegals and stick them on Nancy Pelosi's property? She's got millions of dollars in the bank. Why doesn't she pay for them? She can afford to put them in the lawn, let her do her lawn or her laundry and all that. Let her pay. Let her spend $10 million out of her money over the next year to help these illegals. And they keep talking about Trump's taxes. How much money they want the guy to pay? I heard one year he paid almost $40 million in taxes. He gave $100,000. I mean, he gives his whole checkup to the government for the border and all that. He don't even take a salary for he pays. I heard on the Air Force One, I heard he's paying for half the fuel for these airliners that he flies around in. I mean, what do these people want out of Trump? He's trying to tell the American public he's the president of the United States. He's the commander-in-chief, Michael, of the strongest military in the world. And he's telling the world right now, in our country mainly, that we're being invaded.
Yeah,
Michael,
we are.
We're being invaded.
Okay, Tom, I got to let you go. Tom, I got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
Okay,
Back
Michael,
with another
God bless
phone
you.
call
Thanks for taking my call.
after
Thanks.
these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I forgot why I called in. listening to your last two callers.
Well, you told our call screener, you told our producer rather, that you wanted to talk about the medical industry.
Yes, that's right. I'm glad. You know what, Mike? I'm so glad. You sound so much better. I never called in last week, but I couldn't. Right? I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm better too. Now we just got to work on getting Claire better.
Well, yes. So my brother, when he was about 31, he decided he was going to lift a transmission, and he actually cracked one of the vertebrae in his back.
Yep.
In between the vertebrae are the discs, right?
Yep.
Anyway, make a long story short, that was almost 30 years ago, and he can't be fixed.
Yeah.
And even surgery, what they want to do is they want to start pinning stuff together, right? Like vertebrae and whatnot. And your chances of walking out of that operation are 50-50. So, in my estimation, Claire is actually lucky she's feeling better, and that it didn't happen to her when she was younger.
Well,
I know it's a hard pill to swallow. I'm sorry.
Well, the age is part of the issue here, and unfortunately, she was better. Unfortunately, lately, she's dealing with a great deal of unsteadiness, and she's had a couple of falls, and she's just dealing with a lot of pain. And so she's basically going to the doctor this afternoon to see what's going on. She's had a new MRI. We've already talked it over and said, no, surgery is not an option. We want to find out what possibilities there are that don't involve surgery. And I've been through this already once before, because in an amazing coincidence, my first wife suffered a major back injury. So I'm 2 for 2 here. And so I've been through the clinics and the doctors twice now. And, I don't want to be accused of practicing medicine without a license. But I am trying to keep a tight eye on what's going on here. But we may be at the point right now where it's going to be pain mitigation. The big issue, though, right now is her unsteadiness, because we can't afford to have her take any more falls.
One of the problems with hurting oneself is that area that's hurt, and this can happen in young folk too, and you know it, is you have something called muscle atrophy.
Yes. And
making that up afterwards can sometimes not happen.
That's a very good comment.
You suffer another injury.
That's a very, very good comment, and that's something for us to think about. And I mean, when she first got into the system, she did have a course of physical therapy that she seemed to help. And maybe it's time to send her back to that, or maybe I need to nag her about whether she's still doing the exercises.
Mike, it's one thing about humans.
Anyway, listen, Al, I got to put you on hold. Al, got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. So, getting back to the medical industrial complex, statins cause diabetes.
Yes.
High blood pressure medication causes cancer.
Yep.
Any needle that is put into a human has risks,
yes,
no matter what's inside of it.
Yes.
Because they can, instead of putting it into the muscle, they could put it into a vein. It has happened, and vice versa. Vaccinations, we can't even go there. Did you hear about that Freedom of Information Act that just came out with the gastrointestinal problems and, respiratory problems, rashes?
Yes.
We can't make this stuff up, Mike. We are.
We're not making it up here. And, I posted that.
You're in a world of hurt.
I posted that flashback story where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. won that lawsuit, that Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that confirmed the government agency that's supposed to be testing vaccines for safety hasn't been doing it for decades. They just put the stuff on out there. And you're right about the mishandling of the needles. I used to donate blood on a regular basis because I've got a rare blood type. And the last time I did it, this operator just, stuck me in the arm and, that missed that. And that missed. Boy, you got a slippery vein there. And I finally said, whoa, Captain Ahab, we're done here. And my entire arm had lividity for like a month after that. So you got to be really, really careful about all of this stuff. Anyway, Al, we're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call.
Mike.
Thank you very much. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the lines because I'm way behind on my talking points. So Al in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I don't really know what's going on with your wife's back or anything. I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you I have one cervical disc that is disintegrating, and I have two of the lower discs in my back that are crushed. And I got one of them inverted machines.
Yes.
No, not really a machine. It's a bench where you hang upside down.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And I'm telling you, that's a lifesaver. I'm telling you, it's well worth every bit of the money.
Well, I actually got one. I actually got one from my first wife, and then she insisted her doctor said she shouldn't use it. I used it for a while, and I loved it, but then I took it back and I traded it on a set of weights, and that was it. I talked about having that with Claire, and we talked about it with her doctor and her physical therapist, and they said not really a good idea given her specific condition and the fact that she is, in fact, going to be 70 years old next month. Oop, I gave away classified information. So, I'm sorry, what?
All right, well, I just thought I'd mention it anyways.
I'm in big trouble. I'm going to have to sleep in the car for the rest of the week. And so, right. As you get older, there's an issue with the connective tissue that weakens, and the discs weaken now, and so the concern is that if she were to be inverted, it could put some unhealthy stress on her joints. Plus, Claire just gets really freaked out about anything that puts her in a head down position for whatever reason.
Well,
so
the way my bench is, you can do slightly angles.
Yes,
and you don't have to go all the way down.
Way.
You just barely do it.
They all work that way. Yeah,
I don't know.
No, I loved it when I had one.
Yeah,
I thought it was great. I loved it when I had one. But we don't do anything with Claire
absolutely.
Without checking with the doctors and then doing a ton of our own research online. We'll basically duck all of this information to double check it. We use duck instead of Google.
I can tell you about the doctors that I had, and when I was diagnosed with cancer for 30-some years now, and they wanted me to do the chemo and all the other stuff, radiation and so forth, and I absolutely would not do none of it, and here I am still.
Well, I'm glad you're still here.
I don't put too much faith in the doctors.
Well, cancer is big business. The big secret of the cancer industry is that 25% of all cancers spontaneously remit, and they don't want you to know that. Their attitude is, we don't know which 25 are going to go away by themselves, so we treat them all. When I had my pneumonia some years back, they initially misdiagnosed me and told me I had lung cancer. And so I had this very scary moment where I was dealing with the fact that I thought I had cancer, and I decided, same as you, I'm not going to do the chemo, I'm not going to do the radiation, I'm going to, roll the dice and try some natural alternatives, because I had seen what chemo and radiation had done to my mother, who died of cancer, or may have died from the cancer treatment. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. My mother went through it, and my father, and I said no, never. There's no way, because it seemed like to me that they went downhill real quick right after that.
Well, the fact of the matter is both chemotherapy and radiation are themselves carcinogenic. And the general idea is, you can die next year of cancer, or we can give you all this radiation and chemo, charge you, zigableams of money, and 5 years, 6 years down the road, you'll get an even more aggressive cancer. It's a business, okay? It is absolutely a business,
right.
And they want us to be ill. They want us to be chronically ill because otherwise their profits go down. Anyway, Al, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call.
You got it spot on the head. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye. Good luck with your health here. We're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show because I got a bunch of stuff to get through. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Okay, so we started out talking about this Richard E. Lugar Center in Tbilisi, and it's actually a biological weapons lab. This is a story coming out of Journal Neo. And the U.S. Department of Defense basically took over this facility along a string of others in the former Soviet Union. And the official cover story is the center does scientific research into animal and human diseases, to develop cures. But the real goal appears to be weapons development, and the center is being accused of testing their weapons on the local animal and human populations without anything such as informed consent. All of this, of course, is illegal under international law and under treaties that have already been signed by the United States of America. The United States of America has signed treaties banning the development of offensive biological weapons research. But our country doesn't keep with treaty agreements anymore. And one of the requirements of the treaty signed by the United States was the destruction of existing stockpiles, which has not happened. Okay, let's talk about our domestic politics here. There's a lot going on. The other day I mentioned this comment from Tucker Carlson about maybe Trump just doesn't want to win re-election because he just seems to be abandoning his base. But Brad Parscale, who's manager of the Trump 2020 campaign, was interviewed on Fox News and said he's building one of the largest political campaign operations in history. Well, Brad may be doing that, but whether Trump is interested or not, I'm not sure. But Brad is out there talking, a good talk because that's his job. And Laura Ingraham said, is he really interested? Because a lot of people are saying he doesn't really want to run again. And Brad Parscale said, well, yeah, he wants to run again. Well, maybe. It's tough to see what Trump's reelection strategy is going to be. Brad's got his work cut out for him. I don't envy him the job because, A, we know no liberal is going to vote for Donald Trump. Period. End of discussion. And right now, because of those open borders, more and more Democratic voters are being flooded into the country right now. Trump won in 2016 because of his GOP base, and he's abandoned them. He has not kept the promises he made to his base in 2016 that got him elected. He's kept every promise he's made to the Jewish community. He's kept all his promises to Israel. But he dropped the ball on vaccine safety. He dropped the ball on election integrity. He still hasn't closed that border, and it looks like he's backing off on that one. We're still mired in all these wars all over the world, and he's getting ready to start a new one in Venezuela. He's turned his back on the independent media that fought tooth and nail against Hillary Clinton's propaganda machine to keep a balanced picture of the campaign before the American people. So, Brad, I hope you're right, but I tend to think Tucker Carlson has the inside track on what's going on. Now, Alec Baldwin is still out there saying, well, I've played the president on TV. I'm sure I could do it for real. And he's out there trying to sort of get the feel of his public support for taking a run at the White House in 2020 and says, beating Trump would be easy, would be so easy. Well, Alec, Hillary was saying the same thing through most of 2016, just as a little bit of a reminder. Now, Baldwin is saying he's not going to ask for any money, which says he's going to self-finance his campaign. I know you've got a lot of money, Alec. You don't have that much. Now, not too long ago, Kirstjen Nielsen announced her resignation from the Department of Homeland Security, and just now, the acting Deputy Secretary, Claire Grady, has done the same. And everybody's saying, what the heck was going on over there? Is there something wrong with Department of Homeland Security? Well, not really. President Trump wants Kevin McAleenan as acting Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. But legally, Nielsen's responsibilities would have transferred to Grady. Trump would have had nothing to say about it. So Grady has been somehow persuaded or induced or bribed to step down, and now President Trump can put Kevin into that position. That's how these political things get done. As you know, Attorney General Barr has been testifying before Congress, and some things are coming on out. One of the first is that while the Mueller report exonerates Trump from any kind of collusion, it's still pushing the Russia interfered with our 2016 election narrative. It's still out there pushing that one. Now, during his testimony, Barr came on out and said, I think spying did occur on the Trump campaign by the Obama administration, and it's a big deal, which prompted an immediate and angry response from Chuck Schumer saying that Barr must retract those comments or prove them immediately. And that's kind of interesting, because when all those other people were perpetuating the conspiracy theory of Trump-Russia collusion, Schumer had nothing to say about it. But today he's out there saying perpetuating conspiracy theories is beneath the office of the Attorney General. Harumph, harumph, harumph. I think Schumer doth protest too much, and he's afraid there may be some proof out there of spying. Now, Attorney General Barr says he's forming a team to probe the FBI's Trump-Russia collusion probe for bias. Why does he need to do that? You've got those text messages from Lisa Page and Peter Strzok revealing bias, heavy bias, just intense bias. So I'm not so sure about Barr. But one thing that did come on out is that they have released a transcript of the discussions of top officials talking about sending in somebody to wear a wire on Donald Trump and try and get something that they could use to invoke the 25th Amendment. So this was apparently Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. That was his idea, to record the president and try and find some evidence to push the president out. This is a coup d'etat. And the report also claimed that Rosenstein tried to recruit enough cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment. Apparently, that's where the plan fell down. They weren't able to get in it. That's a coup d'etat. And what I don't understand is why Donald Trump isn't responding to this a little more forcefully. I mean, I realize this isn't Game of Thrones, but when you go after a king and fail, usually the king comes back at you. I think Tucker Carlson's right. I think Trump won the presidency. His ego is satisfied. Now he's just coasting. He's letting Pompeo and Bolton run the foreign policy to the detriment of the world and our nation. And he's just going to hit the golf courses and do the rallies and smile for the cameras, and he's going to coast through. And he's basically going to lose 2020. He's basically going to throw it to whoever the Democratic nominee is. And sadly, it may be Hillary Clinton. We know that George Herbert Walker Bush deliberately threw his reelection because the investigation into Iran-Contra was getting just a little too close to him. And people at the time were saying, what's wrong with George Herbert Walker Bush? His re-election campaign is lackadaisical. He's not even really trying. And on the eve of the election, it was like he already knew he'd lost. It's not the first time somebody tries to throw the presidency in a friendly direction. That's why Nixon got rid of Spiro T. Agnew and got Gerald Ford in there before he stepped down, because Gerald Ford had been on the Warren Commission. Gerald Ford knew what the real secret was behind all of that Watergate stuff. And he would keep the secrets. Ford came on in, declared our long national nightmare is over, pardoned everybody, thereby ending any investigations, any further investigations, and that was the end of it. Over in the Manafort case, there's this GOP lobbyist, Sam Patton, who straw purchased inauguration tickets for a Ukraine oligarch. He apparently lied to the Senate Intelligence Committee about it, was subpoenaed for all of his emails and said, oh, we had a computer problem and all 200,000 of his Gmail emails disappeared from the archive. Boy, we make such poor quality computer systems here in the United States. Back during Chinagate, oh, the White House email system failed, no backups available. Okay. 100 days into her second speakership, Nancy Pelosi appears to be losing control of the House floor. They are debating the next attempt at passing a permanent budget deal. And there we are. It's kind of falling apart already. And the usual issue is the progressives want more non-military spending. The hardline Democrats are saying, no, we have to keep the wars going. And it's kind of breaking apart. So Pelosi literally had to pull this off the floor for more debate and more negotiation. She was trying to get it on through. And we are coming up on yet another budget deadline. Could we see another government shutdown? Maybe. Could it be permanent? I think it's a good idea. Now, do you remember after Trump won in 2016, how all of these celebrities and stars just went totally ballistic and crying and screaming? And now, of course, all these years later, they're trying to sort of recover from that because it left an indelible mark on their brand. So comedian Chelsea Handler was on yesterday's episode of ABC's The View and claimed that it was her white privilege that caused her to act like a spoiled brat. Because growing up with being white and being privileged, you know, she didn't know defeat, she didn't know disappointment, and that's why she overreacted to Trump's victory. So there it is, folks. All those snowflakes were suffering from white privilege. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the phone lines are closed, so go ahead and put that handset back in the cradle here, or the cell phone back in the pouch. Up in New Hampshire, Project Veritas actually got this gentleman, New Hampshireman living in Atkinson, on video admitting that he voted twice in the 2018 midterms, once in the state of New Hampshire and once down in Florida. And then Project Veritas took the video to the Attorney General's office in New Hampshire to show them there's a problem with voter fraud. And the Attorney General of New Hampshire immediately issued a grand jury subpoena, not for the man who voted twice, but for Project Veritas itself. In other words, the New Hampshire Attorney General, they're not going to investigate the vote fraud. They're going to investigate Project Veritas. And this is a continuation of this growing trend of refusing to investigate corruption and crime, and instead go after journalists trying to get the news out there, whether it's Project Veritas or Wolfgang Halbig or InfoWars or Julian Assange. All right, let's talk about the economic news here for a little bit. The Italian government is pushing ahead with new laws challenging the central bank's control of the country's reserves. Rome is calling for public ownership of the nation's gold. Their attitude is, it's the people's gold. It belongs to them, and it shouldn't be under the control of a private central bank. Of course, the private central bankers have a different idea. It's all ours. The gold is ours. You will have to make do with these pieces of paper with colored ink, which we have gone to such trouble to make for you, to pretend is money. But there's going to be a bit of a fight there. But the ruling coalition of the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement and the League parties proposed two bills that have evoked nationwide controversy over the country's long-standing financial and monetary system. One draft law obliges the central bank's owners to sell their shares to the Italian Treasury at prices from the 1930s, which is apparently when they acquired it all, while the second law is set to declare Italian nationals to be the owners of the Bank of Italy's reserves. So we're starting to see a pushback all over the world about private central banking. And I did go back into my own archives and post a bunch of stories that I had written about private central banking and what a trap it is and how abusive it is. So you might want to look at those. Getting on back to this caller that we had on the line talking about all these illegals who are flooding across the border and what are we going to do with them. Right now, apparently, and you're not going to hear this on the corporate media, the number of job openings in the United States dropped by more than 500,000 in just 1 month. So by all means, let's just bring in more of these illegal immigrants and give them work permits and just send them on out into the hinterland. Sometimes I think those people in Washington, D.C. are on drugs. Actually, they are. Did you know there's actually a pharmacy inside the Capitol building? And one of the pharmacists who used to work there came on out and he said it was very scary. These are the people making the laws for the country, and they are on some serious medication and suffering some serious mental issues. Okay. Over in Atlantic City, apparently the casino profits are collapsing. That's always a bad sign when the gambling casinos can't get by. I remember the last time the economy turned down here in Hawaii, it was just, I noticed there used to be down on Kamehameha, there were like 4 or 5 of these gentlemen's clubs with these scantily clad dancers. Not that I go into such things. I'm a happily married man. But I noticed they just kept going out of business and closing and closing and closing. One of them is now a car accessories place where I bought a backup camera for our car. Boeing shareholders are now suing Boeing's management over the Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX crashes. Apparently, market value has tumbled by $34 billion with a B within 2 weeks of the second fatal incident in 5 months. So it's a class action lawsuits filed in Chicago, and it's basically seeking damages for alleged securities fraud violations. Now, that may be a little tough to prove that there's a security fraud. It is unfortunately just the fact that airlines have stopped buying the 737 MAX, and it's probably going to impact sales of the 777X, and understandably, investors are going to say, well, Boeing's not a good investment right now. I know, I'll go buy some Lockheed Martin. So the lawsuits are going to be flying, but apparently Chief Executive Dennis Muhlenberg and Chief Financial Officer Gregory Smith have also been named as defendants. So that is going to get ugly. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Getting on back to immigration and all of these immigrants pouring across the border. Apparently, according to the Border Patrol, criminal organizations are smuggling migrants into the United States despite risks to their lives, because apparently a migrant detained by U.S. authorities near a border crossing with Mexico is suffering from a flesh-eating bacterial infection. These are very nasty. Now, if you really think about it, all infections eat your flesh to a degree. This one, it's just voracious. It dissolves your tissues. And that's another aspect of this, that this is not just an economic problem. It's not just an immigration problem. It's not just a vote fraud problem. It's a health crisis. It's a health crisis, and something needs to be done. So up steps Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she's saying, well, you know the reason for the migrant surge. It's human-caused global warming. Because their countries in Central and South America are just so hot now that they're just fleeing north just to stay alive. And we have to let them into the United States of America just so that they don't broil. You know, forget about democratic policies. It's global warming. This is as ignorant as it gets. And George Soros, I think you've just wasted a lot of money promoting Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because every time she opens her mouth, she sticks both feet in. Another article here, this is from Before It's News, and it's talking about the same thing that our caller was saying. This is an invasion. If you look at the makeup of these migrant hordes, they'll put some children and women up front, but the vast majority of these caravans are bringing in military and gang-age males between 16 to 35 years old. They're in fighting shape. Okay, now finally, a little bit of good news here. The White House is planning on targeting the tens of billions of dollars in so-called remittance payments sent by illegal immigrants back to their home countries. See, what's going on is very simple. These migrants will show up and say, I am claiming asylum. I am afraid for my life in my home country. If you don't let me in, I will be tortured to death back home because I have several overdue library books. So they're allowed on in. They're given a work permit. They start working, and anything they don't need to live on is immediately sent back out of the United States down to their country of origin, to whatever family they left behind. And I understand from their point of view, they're trying to just get some more money for their families, but they're bleeding it out of the United States of America. And this is something that needs to stop. And so the White House is saying, yeah, they're going to stop it. If you want to come into the country and claim asylum and you want a work permit, that's fine. But any money that you earn has to be put back into the American economy. Now, I got an email from somebody out there saying, well, sooner or later that those dollars going to Nicaragua and so forth, they'll come back to the United States. Not necessarily. You'd be amazed how much U.S. currency is circulating around the world that never touches the U.S. You know, after decades of the dollar being the global currency, it truly has become a global currency. And there's a huge amount of commerce that's carried on around the world with these dollars. So as a matter of fact, billions of dollars being sent by these illegal immigrants with work permits down to Central America, we may never see them again. At a time when our economy is struggling, we're going into a recession. The war spending is going up. This nation is on a course headed for disaster. It's absolutely headed for disaster. Okay, over in Europe, the EU Parliament President Tajani is speaking out on Brexit, saying that yes, they might be open to another extension for the Brexit deal, as long as Theresa May comes up with a clear plan. And it shows how prescient it was for the British government to be setting up to actually go through May's EU elections. that may be something they wish did not happen, because right now Nigel Farage's Brexit party is outpolling UKIP by 3-1. So Nigel Farage may have himself a landslide victory there. Apparently, the Brexit, actually the senior Tory backbenchers had a meeting and are demanding that Theresa May set a deadline by which she will step down. WikiLeaks is accusing the Ecuadorian embassy of extensive spying operation against Assange. And, of course, Ecuador is really not happy about that. And we're seeing all of these stories. It started last Friday where WikiLeaks claimed that Ecuador is about to expel Assange. It was going to happen within hours, if not days. And Ecuador denied it. And then WikiLeaks came out again, I think it was yesterday, saying, yes, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I'm almost getting a sense of a palace coup within WikiLeaks because, Julian Assange has been locked up in that embassy. He's getting all the press. He's the star of WikiLeaks. And all the people over at WikiLeaks who are actually doing the work, they're probably feeling like they're tired of being in his shadow and that maybe it is time for him to be stepping down. They're trying to force the issue. But the Ecuadorian foreign minister is saying that staying there in the embassy forever is really not an option. They just don't know what to do about it. But it is an awkward situation. If Ecuador evicts Julian Assange, who is an Ecuadorian citizen, he was made an Ecuadorian citizen, it will be a global scandal. It will make Ecuador look bad. What I don't understand is why Australia, which is Julian Assange's home, has not stepped on in to say, look, this is at least originally our citizen, we want him back. But apparently the arrangement is at some point Assange is going to be kicked out of the embassy. The British police are going to be waiting there to arrest him and extradite him to the United States of America, where he's going to be put on trial, supposedly for espionage. And boy, if I were a lawyer, I would volunteer for that legal team because I've got the perfect defense. And it's Richard Nixon versus the New York Times and the Washington Post. Because Julian Assange did not solicit classified information. It was leaked to him, and he, as a news distributor, journalist, whatever you want to call it, publisher, published. Which is exactly what the Washington Post and the New York Times did during the Pentagon Papers. And the United States Supreme Court ruled that it was perfectly legitimate for them to release to the American people information the American people needed to know. The American people needed to know the government had been lying about Vietnam. The American people needed to know that the government was lying about what was going on in Iraq. The legal precedent has been set. Okay. Apparently the identity politics people, now they're after Robert E. Lee. He's been dead for 150 years, but by golly, it's time for us to just, get Robert E. Lee. And what's going on, and this is part of that globalism, New World Order thing, is our history is being erased bit by bit. They're justifying it now on the basis of, well, these were Confederates and they were slaveholders, and they went after Thomas Jefferson because he's a slaveholder. But they'll get around to everybody sooner or later. They'll find a reason, to get rid of Ben Franklin. Oh, he was a womanizer. When he was our ambassador over there in Great Britain, oh my goodness, he was just dallying around. What a sexist he was. We just have to erase him. Take him off the $100 bill. They'll go after George Washington. Oh, he had a distillery at Mount Vernon there. He was contributing to sin. That's what they want to do. They want to take the entire panorama of American history and they want to take a sponge to it and just bit by bit, just blank it out so that the next generation doesn't know who they are or who they came from or what their history really is. All they'll know is what the New World Order schools will say. You are part of the New World Order. You will love your one world government. You will love your one world private central bank. And by the way, we need half of you to walk into those disintegrators because there are too many of you right now. Don't forget to have your vaccines first. All right, now this one, I can kind of see their point of view. And there's a company, Waitrose, that getting ready for Easter had a package of candy Easter ducklings. And they are white, pink, and dark brown. And they have names underneath, crispy, fluffy, and ugly. And ugly is the dark one on the right. And it created a huge, huge outcry where Waitrose is now repackaging all of these eggs with a different name for the dark brown chocolate duck. Now I can understand the upset in this hypersensitive age, but in their defense, if you remember the Hans Christian Andersen story, The Ugly Duckling, what color was the duck? It was black, until it revealed it wasn't a duck at all, but a swan. And I think whoever designed the package was probably thinking along that line because, especially if you're my age, we grew up with Hans Christian Andersen stories. I still love that movie that Danny Kaye did. It was one of his best, I thought. And okay. This is a little sick. In fact, it's a little bit gross. There's this activist, transgender activist, Erica Hart, and she tweeted a photo on Twitter supposedly showing the floor around a toilet in a stall in a men's room with a single drop of what she claims is blood, which she claims proves men can get periods. See? The transgender men can get periods. First of all, how do we know it's blood? Second, what are you doing in the men's room? And third, how do we know it isn't from a cut on the finger or a bloody nose? Because the single drop of blood is actually quite a distance away from the toilet. And again, how did you know it was in there so that you could go in and take the picture? Needless to say, she has been roasted on the internet. It's amazing here. Tasmania has made it optional to list gender on birth certificates. And that's Australia's first state to make it legally optional to list the gender. And the bill also removes a condition that had required transgender people to have surgery before their gender was recognized. So now it's basically you can go on in on the birth certificate and say, I am whatever. There are 85 different genders out there now? As for myself, I'm a U.S. male. Okay, here's another one where it's just this PC stuff is getting out of control. Over in New York City, there was this so-called healthy Chinese food restaurant called Lucky Lee's that basically the marketing is saying the food is cooked in less oil, it avoids MSG, refined sugars, is gluten-free. I would eat there because I can't have MSG. It's basically a healthy Chinese restaurant. But oh boy, the cultural appropriation police stepped on in because the owner of the restaurant is a white woman. And she wanted to set this up because she likes Chinese food and she wanted a healthier version of it. And so the PC police are out there just screaming, she can't do this, it's cultural appropriation. Only Chinese people can have Chinese restaurants. And only Italian people can have Italian restaurants. That's utterly ridiculous. How can you have this cultural appropriation at the same time you're trying to push multiculturalism? Okay. I'm skipping on down because we're almost out of time, and I want to get into the fact that we have got a major storm that is over our Midwest, and it looks to be getting worse as it goes into the weekend. Winter Storm Wesley, the latest bomb cyclone, has led to blizzard warnings in the plains and upper Midwest. And what they call a bomb cyclone means that the barometric pressure drops a full 24 millibars in 24 hours if it's located south of 60 degrees north latitude, because it's supposed to be weak at this latitude. And right now there is snow and rain sweeping across north central Montana. This is, of course, the 10th of April, I might add. And I'm sure over there somebody is grabbing Puxatawny Phil by the scruff of his neck and saying, "Look, you said this was going to be over by now." Puxatawny Phil is saying, "That's what Al Gore told me." So you've got this snow and rain and gloom of night. And now there's apparently an epic superstorm forming over the Great Plains. And they're expecting Texas and Oklahoma, Texas, to see a foot of snow this weekend. That is Texas, where our broadcast center is located. A foot of snow this weekend on the 10th of April. You think about that one. The next time one of these global warming people come on up and say, "Oh, we have to save the earth from human-caused global warming." We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today, and I just got a text message that in northern Colorado, they're under total whiteout conditions. So, yes, gosh darn that human-caused global warming. And if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is right, then all those illegal immigrants are heading for Colorado to bury themselves in that snow to save them from human-caused global warming. Interestingly enough, story that came out of Breitbart is saying that there's a new scientific study that nobody wants to talk about because it's showing that right now the current levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere match those seen 3 million years ago. 3 million years ago, today, exactly the same. And obviously 3 million years ago, we humans were not driving cars or eating the meat that requires cow flatulence. We weren't barbecuing or refusing to recycle. There was no industrial age, no coal mines. No humans, actually. That ought to make you think here. Now, there's a new book out here, and it's a very blatant attempt to basically discredit those who question human-caused global warming. And the book is called The Workshop in the World, What 10 Thinkers Can Teach Us About Science and Authority. And basically it tries to equate the flat earthers and the climate change questioners. And when this whole flat earth thing got going, I said, look, this is being put out there as a propaganda tool to kookify the internet. And sure enough, anytime anybody's going to have a question about what's going on, they're going to say, "Oh, you're like those flat earthers here. You don't think, forget about all the snow that's pouring on down here. The world is getting warmer. You don't agree with that? You're the same as those flat earthers. You think vaccines aren't safe? You're flat earther. Think GMOs may have problems? You're a flat earther." That's it. That's what the propaganda tool is all about. And it's absurd on the face of it because you really, to be very honest, nobody's going to think the earth is flat. It's just pure propaganda to try and create a device with which to ridicule those who won't accept the authoritative view that humans are warming the world, that vaccines are perfectly safe, even if your baby has gone into multiple convulsions, it's probably because you shook him too hard. And that, GMOs are the savior of the world, that politicians are honest, that Saddam really did have nuclear weapons, that Assad really was gassing his people, and that Maduro is an evil tyrant who must be deposed. If you don't agree with any of that stuff, you're one of those flat earth people, aren't you? That's That's it. That's the only reason for that to be out there. To be a handy little handle with which to grab onto anybody who doesn't go along with the official view and drag them off the stage. Like the big hook they used to have on the Gong Show. Alrighty, so we're coming up here on the top of the program here, and I still have a lot of talking points, which will obviously bleed into tomorrow's program. So stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here or at the website, share it with everyone that you know. We have to just get on out there. We have to be evangelists for the truth. And most important right now is to just go on out and remind everybody about how they were lied to over the last 2 years about Trump-Russia collusion. And just keep hitting that point. Corporate media is at war with independent media financially. We are at war with them in terms of credibility. So we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.